What's up, guys? Some of you have asked that I do a video about no-show policies. What kind of policy do I have? How much do I charge for a missed session? How do I implement my no-show policy? I'm going to answer all of your top questions about no-show policies in this video. Welcome to Private Practice Skills. I'm Dr. Marie Fang, psychologist in private practice. I post videos offering tools I learned the hard way about starting and growing private practice so that you don't have to. So, no-show policies. Though they're typically common practice in our field, it's not uncommon to have some strong feelings about implementing one. And I know when I first started in private practice, I wanted to avoid no-show policies like the plague, but fortunately I had a good supervisor who made me implement a no-show policy, and I'm so glad that he did. So what's the point of having a no-show policy? From my perspective, there's kind of two main purposes of it. One is simply to acknowledge that your time is valuable. Maybe you could have been at home, maybe you're paying for a babysitter and somebody didn't show up but you still had to pay. Whatever it might be, your time is valuable. And second, you're running a profitable business. And if you're running a profitable business but you're holding someone's time slot for free when somebody else who was actually going to show up and pay for that appointment could have come instead, then it really makes your clients respect your business and also be really bought into the therapy process if they know they have to pay for not showing. Another major question is, how much do you charge for a missed session? Now, this is really up to you to determine based on what fits best for you and, of course, within the parameters of your jurisdiction and any other laws you have to follow. But I've seen people do things ranging from simply charging their full fee regardless of whether this person is usually paying with insurance or usually paying out of pocket with cash. Some people charge some fraction of their full fee. Some people will just charge the copay if this client is using insurance typically to apply payment for counseling. It's really up to you to determine how much you're going to charge. Now, a note on this is if you are on insurance panels, be sure to check with your insurance contracts to see what their rules are. Some insurance might let you bill for a no-show. Many insurance won't let you bill them for a no-show, and they might also have rules as far as whether you can charge that client or not for that no-show. So to be sure to know what those rules are before you do anything with that. Personally, I've developed a policy where I charge my client the full amount that they would typically pay if they were seeing me in person. Now, I do have a sliding scale fee that I offer to clients, so rather than charging my full rate to all clients, I will simply charge them based on wherever on the scale they typically pay. Another important question is whether there are any exceptions to the no-show policy. So for example, a lot of therapists like to waive the first time a client misses their appointment and just sort of give that reminder that they do have this policy so that when it happens again a second time, then they charge for that missed appointment. It also could be an option that, for example, if somebody's sick, their child is sick, they get in a car accident or something serious like this happens, that you waive the fee as well. And this is something that might be really worth considering because imagine if you were going to see your therapist and you got in a car accident and they still charged you for that session. How might you feel about that? I would have some feelings about that. So personally, I've opted to have a few scenarios where I waive the fee, but I try to be very clear on what these scenarios are in advance so that when it happens, I can be well equipped to respond to my client when I call them up and they're not shown up yet and they're saying, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I double booked or I this or I that I already know whether I'm going to charge them for that missed session or not. The last huge question that remains is, how do you implement a no-show policy? I know so many therapists who have no problem saying that they have a no-show policy and they're totally on board with it in theory, but then when their client no-shows, they have a lot of trouble implementing that charge. So let's go through a few tips to help you be successful in implementing your no-show policy. Tip number one, include it in your informed consent. So be sure that you're super clear about under what circumstances you charge for a missed session, how much you charge, and how you will go about charging the client. So for me, for example, I have a 24-hour cancellation policy that they need to let me know by, and I charge them the same amount they typically pay me for their session, and I do so by sending an invoice via Square. I make that all clear within the informed consent. Tip number two, repeat it in the first session. Let's face it, most clients don't read the informed consent. I mean, do you read the informed consent when you sign things? I don't always do that. So it's so important to go over some of the key details from your informed consent when you're meeting with your client for the first time. So for me, I do it right at the beginning of the first session. Just after I go over the limits of confidentiality, I reiterate my 24-hour cancellation policy, how much I charge, and how I will charge them if that happens. And I also create an opportunity for them to ask questions, have any responses, so that everything is cleared up right from the get-go before it ever has an opportunity to happen. Tip number 3, remind clients of your policy when they miss an appointment. So personally, I say something along the lines of, just as a reminder, I do charge for those missed sessions, and I'll be sending you an invoice via Square for you to pay me at your convenience for that session. Tip number 4, don't apologize. This is huge. If you've done everything that I've said so far in order to set up your no-show policy, then your client has no reason to be surprised when they find out that you're going to charge them for their missed session. So you have no reason to apologize when it happens. It's up to the client to experience the natural consequences of their behavior, which you clearly stated from the outset in more than one way. And if they're really not bought into counseling, then that's something for them to really need to consider as well. Tip number 5, circle back in the following session. So the next time you meet again after the no-show happens, be sure to circle back and ask them if they have any questions and to see if any sort of therapeutically relevant content comes up. From my experience, most of the time when a client no-shows, it's just one of those hiccups that comes along in life, and it happens to all of us at some point, and people are completely understanding. There's not much to be said about it. But every now and then, the clients will have a response that actually could bring up some really relevant therapeutic material. So make sure not to skip over that, or to make sure not to shy away from the fact that you did charge your client for that missed session, because there might be something really worth diving into with them related to that. And as an extension of what I just said, tip number 6, if it keeps happening, be sure to dive deeper. For most clients, it'll happen on such a rare occasion that there's not much more to be said about it. It's just life. But there are some clients who repeatedly miss sessions over and over again, even though maybe they understand that they need to pay the fee. This might be a good time to circle back, see how they're feeling about the counseling process, see if there's anything that maybe they're not fully bought into, or if there needs to be any changes between the two of you and your dynamic together in order to make counseling more successful for them. Well, I hope you found these tips helpful as you consider developing a no-show policy. Let me know in the comments below if you implement a no-show policy and if you have any tips to add that you find particularly helpful in doing so. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well. Oh.